Good morning, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News. Today is Friday, the 20th of June, 2025. Now, the situation with respect to the possible involvement with the United States joining Israel in the war against Iran seems to be changing daily. We're going to give you the latest to kind of put things into perspective where they're at right now, because it can be very much a head scratcher what's been going on the last couple of days. All right, let's get to it. First of all, Trump said yesterday he will decide whether to strike Iran within 2 weeks. This is from Israel National News. It was a big story yesterday, and it's confused an awful lot of people. Why the change all of a sudden? We'll talk about that. And this could be the answer from the New York Post. Trump's fear of Iran becoming another Libya stalls decision on nuke site strikes for 2 weeks, according to certain sources, again from the New York Post. However, we have this story from N12. This is an Israeli site. Israel and U.S. could strike Fordow tonight. Here's what you need to know. And so we're going to look at that possibility. Netanyahu says Israel will hit all nuclear facilities. They've already destroyed half of Iran's launchers. This is from the Times of Israel. They are going fast and furious, forward, no matter what Trump says or what he's doing. And then Netanyahu does not rule out eliminating Iran's supreme leader. All options are open. This is from Israel National News, and this after the attempted murder of those people in the hospital there in Beersheba the other day. And only by the grace of God, there weren't at least 100 people killed, because the bomb that was sent to a hospital by this evil Iranian regime. And then the story we have been dealing with, and now it hits the news. Mystery flights from China to Iran raise questions amidst Israel conflict. Fox News has done a story on this. We'll talk about it. We had a special report yesterday about the possibility of chemical or biological weapons, dirty bombs, maybe is what's been taken from China into Iran, where there's some 20 odd planes, 747s that have landed in Iran with something. We don't know what it is. There's a lot of different possibilities, and this is one of them. So that one's now on the table. It's now getting some airtime. And finally, Tehran blocking the Strait of Hormuz would be a suicidal move, an Iran expert says. And this is one of the issues we brought up the other day. One of Iran's options that's mentioned. We can block the Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of the oil traffic in the world goes through. And we'll talk about it and the possibility of that happening. That's a story from YNET. So we got a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff this morning. All right, let's give you the background. Why this story yesterday about the 2 week time frame was such a head scratcher. Remember the day before, we reported the night before, Donald Trump got on Fox News as Sean Hannity. Here's what he said. They've had their warnings. Now they'll get their consequences. In an interview with Hannity on Fox News, he warned, this is their last chance. Next time I speak, it may be over. He added, I don't want war. I want victory for Israel, for America, for civilization. And then he said this, it seems a matter of hours, not days. So that's where we were left yesterday morning. And we also reported that the U.S. was readying an attack from Diego Garcia. We had intel on that. There were planes ready to attack Iran, on the side of Israel. And then it looked as though, as we dealt with it yesterday, everything was ready for an attack, an imminent attack from the U.S. on Iran, and U.S. joining the war on the side of Israel. And then this happened yesterday. Headline number one, Trump says he'll decide whether to strike Iran within 2 weeks. This is from Israel National News. White House Press Secretary Carolyn Levitt shares a quote from President Trump outlining his desire for a peaceful solution to the Iranian nuclear crisis, but he is also willing to use force if required. Quoting Trump directly, Levitt shared that Trump stated, based on the fact that there's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran in the near future, I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks. This is from the night before, sounding like it's a matter of hours before the U.S. gets involved. Levitt stated that attempts to negotiate with Iran are ongoing. As for correspondence between the U.S. and the Iranians, I can confirm that correspondence has continued. We were engaged with 6 rounds of negotiations with them, both indirect and direct. When asked what a deal with Iran would entail, she stated no enrichment of uranium, and Iran is absolutely not able to achieve a nuclear weapon. The president has been very clear about that. And of course, the Ayatollah in Iran has been very clear about the fact that no, they have a right to enrich uranium. They're not going to stop it. It's a red line for them. So here's the question. What in the world happened? Why the overnight change of mind? Well, the next story from the New York Post may shed some light on what may have happened. So we're going to get to it. This headline number two, Trump's fear of Iran becoming another Libya stalls decision on nuke site strike for 2 weeks. This is from the New York Post. President Trump's wariness over bombing Iran is due in part to concerns about creating another Libya. If Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei is toppled, the administration told insiders told the Post, New York Post, as Trump shelves his decision for up to 2 weeks. The president in recent days has specifically mentioned the oil-rich North African country's decade-long plunge into anarchy in 2011 after the U.S. joined a NATO bombing campaign to oust Director Muammar Gaddafi. Three sources close to the administration said. Trump doesn't want it to turn into Libya, said one insider familiar with the administration's deliberations on potentially joining Israeli airstrikes against Iran's nuclear program. And that's why we had the announcement Thursday afternoon that President is biding his time before deciding on whether Israel strikes are necessary, based on the fact there's a substantial chance, she said, of negotiations, which seems to be nonsensical. There's no deal that can be worked out that will have, Iran satisfied with the present regime. So basically, in other words, a strike on Iran with the possible death of the supreme leader may end up with a regime change that could be even more chaotic for the world than the present situation. And Libya is a case in point. It's been 14 years since Gaddafi was overthrown, and the country is still divided between East and West. So the issue that Trump, as well as the entire world, faces is that at the end of the day, whatever does happen will not bring immediate peace to the region. Indeed, there's no guarantee that a new regime in Iran will unite the country at all. So basically, every possible outcome of what could happen is fraught with problems. While Iran's nuclear ambitions do need to be put to a halt, the outcome in the short term could be even more chaotic than what we see right now. And simply put, nobody knows what will happen. We're in a state of flux, and no one knows what the short term outcome will be. Now, along this line, we have another headline. This is from Israel, from N12 News, and it says Israel and U.S. could strike Fordow tonight. Here's what we need to know. And again, it's 10 hours ahead. We're about almost 5 a.m. in the West Coast as we're doing this. And 10 hours, of course, would be 3 in the afternoon. On Friday, the Sabbath is approaching. So we talk about tonight, it would be Friday night Israeli time. In other words, a few hours from now. As tensions escalate, Israel's intensified campaign against Tehran and the potential for a U.S.-Israeli strike on Fordow signal a critical juncture in the conflict with Iran. Israel Defense Minister Israel Katz has directed the Israeli Defense Forces to intensify military strikes on Iranian regime targets in Tehran, aiming to destabilize the government and enhance deterrence against missile attacks on Israel's home front. The directive follows a situation assessment meeting on Friday morning, that was this morning, with senior IDF officials. And they list who they all are, including the head of the operations, the chief of staff, the head of the operations director, the head of military intelligence. They all got together. And Katz, basically the defense minister, concluded in what he said. He's emphasizing targeting, quote, symbols of power, such as the Basij paramilitary force, the Revolutionary Guards, alongside mechanisms of population oppression to prompt widespread civilian evacuation from Iran. We must bring about the destabilization of the regime and increase deterrence against missile attacks on Israel's home front, while continuing to target facilities and scientists to thwart Iran's nuclear program until all objectives are achieved. And this has been part of their ongoing operation since June 13th, when Operation Rising Lion started. So again, it's the attempt of destabilization. We mentioned yesterday, Katz, after the bombing in Beersheba, where the hospital miraculously, escaped this murderous bombing. Like we said, up to 100 people or over 100 people could have been killed that were there previously where the bomb hit the day before if they had not been moved. Katz was so mad, he said the Ayatollah it's fair game now. We're getting off with his head. We've got a lot of people in Israel that are saying this in leadership. That after what this happened, and the fact that they were only targeting civilian populations in Israel, not military targets, this seems to be open season on the Ayatollah, which brings to the next couple of headlines. Netanyahu says Israel will hit all nuclear facilities and has destroyed half of Iran's launchers. This is from the Times of Israel. In a rare Hebrew interview, Netanyahu says campaign is ahead of schedule and the IDF can strike Fordow without U.S. help. If in other words, if need be, they can get Fordow itself, he said. He also states the offensive will aid hostages return as Hamas relies on Iran. In other words, Israel's not going to wait around for some U.S. response, wait up to 2 weeks. They're going, fast and furious. against Iran right now. So we don't know what's going to happen next. And then add to this the next headline: Netanyahu does not rule out eliminating Iran's supreme leader. All options are open, from Israel National News. He visited the Soroka Medical Center yesterday after the strike, stating 2,500 years ago, Cyrus freed the Jewish people. Now the Jewish people are helping the Persian people break free. Prime Minister Netanyahu visited his medical center where the missile strike happened. He addressed the possibility of eliminating the supreme leader. All options are open. It's better not to talk about it in the media. He's also asked about the future American involvement in the war with Iran and explained it depends on Trump. He knows the game. And then he said, regarding the Islamic regime, 2,500 years ago, Cyrus freed the Jewish people. Now the Jewish people are helping the Persian people break free. He added there are more nuclear targets, but emphasized in the end, there will not be a nuclear or a missile threat. And Israel's not going to stop, not stop whatsoever. Now let's shift gears to the story we did yesterday, the breaking news about these flights that are coming in, because we talked about yesterday the number of flights from China. The 747s had gone up to some 20 flights that have entered, Iranian airspace. So it's finally picked up by someone else. Fox News yesterday did this story. Mystery flights from China to Iran raise questions amid Israel conflict. Boeing 747 spotted leaving China for Iran as tensions escalate following the Israeli strikes on nuclear facilities. Former Trump senior national security director said this is a remarkable turn of events. The Heritage Foundation Allison Center director Robert Greenway weighs in on China's reportedly sending mystery transport planes to Iran. This is from Fox News and Laura Ingraham on the Ingraham Angle. Several Boeing 747s have been spotted on radar leaving China for Iran over the last week. And we mentioned yesterday, there's over 20 of them, according to reports, sparking concerns that the Chinese Communist Party is helping the Middle Eastern nation transport cargo or people out of the country as Israel continues to strike the country's nuclear facilities. Starting on June 14th, Flight Radar 24 shows that at least 5 flights traveled from China to Iran. The Daily Telegraph reported mystery transport planes had flown westward alongside northern China before crossing into Kazakhstan, south through Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan. Then they fall off the radar when they approach Iran. Additionally, the flights indicated that they had a final destination of Luxembourg, but don't appear any of them ever cross into European airspace. People say, well, they're just going to Luxembourg. Well, that was the flight plan, but they never got there. And so some experts have speculated that these types of planes are typically used for transport and could be evidence that China is aiding its longtime ally Iran during the conflict with Israel, although Fox News Digital has not independently confirmed the nature of the flights. And that's one possibility. They're moving people out of the country, very important people in the Iranian leadership, get them out of the country because they believe the country is going to fall. It's important, the article goes on to say, to remember that what the relationship is. 43% of China's oil and gas comes from the Middle East. A large volume of that is from Iran. Robert Greenway mentioned from Heritage Foundation. It's like it likes to buy sanctioned oil below the market value. That's what China does, and fuels the Chinese economy and also its military ambitions. So there's a central relationship here. They've been relatively quiet, in fact, extremely quiet about the current conflict and coming to Iran's insistence. So again, then they talk about that fire we talked about at the port a few weeks ago, where solid propellant for missiles that exploded created a tremendous amount of damage a month ago. And this person says it's unlikely to see Chinese arms shipments under the circumstances to Iran. Uh, we don't know. It's more likely they're removing material and personnel. Again, we don't know. Everybody is speculating here, but it's just as possible that they're moving in some type of chemical or biological weapons for Iran to use against Israel. And this is the worry. And again, the experts don't know. Almost half of the experts, I'm told, excuse me, with the intel that they have, think this is exactly what's happening. They're moving in, some type of biological or chemical weapons, dirty bomb, whatever the case may be. So Iran will have an offensive weapon used against Israel. Again, simply put, we do not know. But it's something that's really, they're up to no good. And it is interesting now that others are picking up the story we talked about. And finally, headline number 7, Tehran blocking the Strait of Hormuz would be a suicidal move, Iran expert says. The corridor for 20% of the world's oil supply, the Strait of Hormuz, is a lifeline for the global economy. If Iran blocks the maritime choke point, as some military officials have threatened, America, Europe, and the Arab world would likely respond militarily. In other words, it's a vital maritime choke point, and it would be basically suicidal for Iran to do something like this. And so the bottom line is, even though this has been threatened, everything it doesn't seem to be a possibility because of the response. The Arab world would, would respond because everybody's going to lose money. The economy would be really shot as far as the world's concerned. And there would be nobody's really friends with Iran right now. In fact, what's interesting, the Arab countries are not really getting out and saying how horrible this is, what Israel's doing. They're actually glad because everybody's afraid of Iran because the kooks that are there running the show that really believe that they're divinely guided. This is the whole key. They're divinely guided by Allah to destroy the little Satan Israel, the big Satan United States, and bring in Islamic rule according to Shia Islam to the entire world. And since most of the Arab world, 90% is Sunni Muslims that have a whole different view of what's right, what the end times will bring, they're happy that Iran is getting theirs. And so if they tried to mine the Strait of Hormuz, that is Iran, and just ruin the world's economy, the Arab world would rise up against Iran too. So Iran, it seems, in a no-win situation. But again, they are desperate. Who knows what's going to happen? So here's the bottom line. There's so many issues right now in a state of flux. Nobody knows what's going to happen. So stay tuned. We'll be with you if something breaks today, because yesterday, like I said, it's such a head scratcher. We didn't know what to say because all of a sudden, after the night before, Trump saying we're going to bomb, it's going to be within hours. Now, all of a sudden, 2 weeks. And so today, we'll hopefully get some answers. All right. I'm Don Stewart. Keep praying. Thanks so much for watching. And as always, until next time, may the Lord richly, richly bless.